The capital city of the alien empire shined like a giant sea of silver lights under the dark night sky. Thousands of flying vehicles moved between massive towers while giant holograms covered the air with royal symbols. In the center of the city stood the Grand Royal Palace, a place so large that even military ships looked small beside it. On this special night, millions of alien citizens watched the royal ceremony from giant public screens across the empire. The beloved alien Princess Lyra was about to enter the ancient battle armor of the first Empress, a sacred machine that had not been used in centuries. The armor was not only a symbol of power, it was a symbol of the empire itself. Princess Lyra slowly walked through the golden palace hall while royal guards stood perfectly still beside her. The young princess wore elegant white royal armor covered with glowing blue symbols. Even powerful generals lowered their heads as she passed them. Unlike many rulers, Princess Lyra was loved by common citizens because she often helped poor families and injured soldiers. The people believed she would become one of the greatest rulers in the empire's history. As the ceremony began, ancient music echoed through the palace while the giant battle armor opened in front of her like a sleeping metal giant waking from a long dream. The royal engineers carefully guided the princess inside the ancient armor while thousands of guests watched silently. The machine was over 4,000 years old and built during the First Galactic Wars. Nobody fully understood how the ancient technology worked anymore, but the armor had always activated safely during royal ceremonies. At first, everything seemed normal. Blue light slowly moved across the armor's surface while the palace computer announced successful activation. Then suddenly, the entire palace shook violently. The armor's eyes turned bright red. Loud warning alarms exploded across the hall as heavy metal plates slammed shut around the princess. Panic instantly spread through the palace. Royal engineers rushed toward the armor while frightened nobles ran away from the platform. Inside the machine, Princess Lyra struggled to breathe as the armor locked tighter around her body. The main engineer quickly connected advanced tools and scanners to the ancient machine, but every screen showed the same terrifying message. Access denied. Plasma cutters failed to damage the armor. Energy drills overheated within seconds. One engineer even tried using military explosives, but the armor remained untouched. Every failed attempt made the princess weaker inside the sealed machine. News of the disaster spread across the galaxy within minutes. Giant public screens showed frightened reporters speaking outside the palace while citizens gathered in silence across crowded city streets. Some people cried openly after hearing the princess might die. Others blamed the royal engineers for using dangerous ancient technology. Inside the palace, arguments exploded between scientists, military officers, and politicians. Each group blamed the other while time slowly ran out. The emperor himself stood helpless near the armor, watching his daughter suffer while the greatest minds in the empire failed again and again. Far away from the royal capital, near the industrial edge of the city, a human mechanic named Ethan worked quietly inside a small repair shop filled with broken machines and old earth tools. Rain hit the metal roof while weak yellow lights flickered above piles of mechanical parts. Ethan wore an old dark blue work jacket covered with oil stains and burn marks. Most aliens ignored humans like him because humans were considered low-class workers in the empire. Ethan spent his days repairing cargo engines, broken farming machines, and damaged transport vehicles for poor citizens who could not afford expensive alien technology. As Ethan repaired an old engine, a damaged radio sitting nearby suddenly interrupted the quiet workshop. A nervous reporter spoke quickly about the disaster inside the palace. Ethan listened silently while tightening a small metal bolt with a wrench. The reporter explained how the greatest royal engineers in the empire could not open the ancient armor trapping the princess. Ethan stopped working for a moment. Something about the situation sounded strangely familiar to him. He slowly looked toward a rusty shelf filled with old earth maintenance supplies. Then his eyes stopped on a small blue spray can sitting in the corner. Before Ethan could think further, loud engines suddenly echoed outside the workshop. Bright military lights filled the rainy street as several royal security vehicles stopped in front of the building. Heavy alien soldiers stepped out and pointed weapons toward the door. Nearby workers quickly ran away in fear while Ethan calmly placed his wrench onto the table. A tall royal officer entered the workshop and looked around with disgust before speaking coldly. "Human mechanic Ethan," the officer said. "By order of the Emperor, you will come with us immediately." Heavy rain continued falling outside the small workshop, while Ethan quietly followed the royal soldiers toward the black military vehicles waiting on the street. Nearby alien workers watched with confused expressions from behind dirty shop windows. Some believed the human mechanic had committed a crime against the Empire. Others laughed quietly, unable to understand why royal soldiers would come for someone as unimportant as Ethan. The tall royal officer opened the vehicle door without saying another word. Bright blue lights reflected across the wet streets as the military convoy quickly disappeared into the giant city. During the long ride toward the royal palace, Ethan sat silently while hologram news reports filled the vehicle screens around him. Every channel showed the same terrifying images of Princess Lyra trapped inside the ancient armor. Reporters spoke with nervous voices while experts argued about possible solutions. One scientist claimed the armor's power core might explode if engineers forced it open. Another warned that the princess had only a few hours left before the life support systems completely failed. The royal officer finally looked toward Ethan with disbelief. "The Emperor is desperate," the officer said coldly. "That is the only reason a human mechanic was called." The massive palace gates slowly opened as the convoy arrived at the royal capital. Ethan stepped out of the vehicle and looked up at the enormous silver towers glowing against the dark sky. Hundreds of royal guards surrounded the entrance while emergency ships flew above the palace like angry metal birds. Inside, the once beautiful royal halls had become scenes of chaos. Engineers rushed between control rooms carrying advanced equipment while frightened nobles whispered nervously in large groups. The moment many aliens noticed Ethan's dirty work clothes and old toolbox, angry voices immediately filled the hall. "This is the human?" one royal engineer shouted with disbelief. "The Empire is trusting a mechanic from the industrial district?" Another scientist laughed openly after seeing Ethan's rusty toolbox. "The princess is dying," he said, "and the Emperor brings us a primitive repair worker." Some nobles looked insulted while others simply shook their heads in disappointment. Humans already had a weak reputation inside the Empire, and Ethan's simple appearance only made things worse. But Ethan ignored every insult and calmly walked toward the giant sealed armor standing in the center of the palace hall. The ancient machine looked even larger up close. Thick black metal plates covered the armor like the shell of some sleeping monster. Red warning symbols flashed across its surface while damaged cables sparked around the platform floor. Inside the armor, Princess Lyra's weak breathing could still be heard through the emergency communication system. Several engineers continued attacking the armor with advanced tools, but nothing changed. Ethan quietly walked around the machine while listening carefully to the sounds coming from inside. Unlike the alien scientists, he did not touch any scanners or computers. He simply observed the armor in silence. The royal engineers watched him with growing anger. One engineer stepped forward impatiently. "Well," he demanded, "what can a human mechanic possibly see that we cannot?" Ethan finally stopped beside one of the armor's massive leg joints. He leaned closer and gently touched the old metal surface with his hand. Then he noticed something strange. Beneath the loud alarms and machine sounds, there was another noise, a dry grinding sound, small, repeating, almost like old rusted metal struggling to move. Ethan slowly stood up and looked toward the Emperor. "The armor is not broken," he said calmly. The entire hall became silent for a moment. "Impossible," one scientist quickly argued. "Our scanners show multiple system failures." But Ethan shook his head. "The systems failed because the armor cannot move properly anymore," he explained. "Something inside the joints is stuck." The royal engineers immediately exploded with laughter. Some aliens openly mocked the idea that the Empire's greatest technology could fail because of something so simple. Then Ethan quietly opened his old toolbox. The laughing slowly stopped as he reached inside and pulled out a small blue spray can covered with scratches and faded letters. One young engineer looked confused. "What is that?" he asked. Ethan calmly held up the can while the entire palace watched him in disbelief. "WD-40, the human mechanic replied. For several long seconds, nobody inside the palace said a single word. Then suddenly, loud laughter exploded across the giant hall. Royal engineers held their heads while some nobles openly mocked the human mechanic. One scientist laughed so hard that tears filled his glowing alien eyes. "A spray can?" he shouted. "The human wants to save the princess with a cleaning liquid?" Even some guards struggled to hide their smiles. The emperor himself looked uncertain, but he had already run out of options. Princess Lyra's weak breathing continued echoing through the damaged communication system inside the armor. Ethan ignored every insult around him and calmly walked toward the armor's massive leg joint. The old metal surface was covered with tiny cracks and dust from centuries of neglect. While alien engineers relied on giant scanners and advanced computers, Ethan carefully studied the simple mechanical structure hidden beneath the armor plates. He slowly shook the blue WD-40 can and aimed the small spray tube directly into the narrow joint opening. Many aliens stared at him with confused expressions, unable to believe such a tiny object could possibly matter. Then Ethan pressed the nozzle. A thin stream of oil sprayed deep into the ancient armor. The strange smell quickly spread through the palace hall while confused engineers looked at each other in disbelief. Nothing happened at first. Several nobles laughed again and started turning away. But then, a loud metallic click suddenly echoed across the room. The entire palace froze. One of the armor's giant fingers slowly moved for the first time since the disaster began. Shock spread across every face in the hall. Engineers immediately rushed toward their scanners while guards stepped backward in fear. Another loud click echoed through the machine as several locked armor plates suddenly loosened. The red warning lights flashing across the armor slowly began changing into blue. Even the emperor looked completely speechless. Inside the armor, Princess Lyra opened her tired eyes in confusion. Fresh air slowly reached her face as the machine's frozen systems began moving again. "Something changed," she whispered weakly through the communication system. Ethan calmly continued spraying the armor joints one by one, while the alien engineers watched in stunned silence. Every movement of the ancient machine felt impossible to them. Thousands of years of advanced alien science had failed, yet a simple human maintenance tool was bringing the armor back to life. One royal engineer quickly stepped toward Ethan with anger and disbelief. "This makes no sense," he argued loudly. "Our scanners detected energy failures, system corruption, and mechanical collapse." Ethan looked at the engineer while continuing his work. "Your scanners looked for complicated problems," he replied calmly. "But nobody checked the simple parts." The engineer stood silent as Ethan carefully loosened another armor joint. More locks released with heavy metallic sounds that echoed through the palace like thunder. As the armor slowly opened further, hidden symbols inside the machine suddenly began glowing bright blue. Ancient alien writing appeared across the palace screens while warning alarms changed into messages written in a forgotten language. The royal scientists quickly rushed toward the displays with shocked expressions. One elderly historian looked terrified while translating the symbols. "This armor," he whispered nervously. "It was never ceremonial." Confused voices filled the hall again as the ancient system continued activating after centuries of silence. Then the palace lights suddenly dimmed. A deep mechanical voice echoed through every wall of the giant hall. "Warning! Defense system reactivation initiated." Fear instantly spread across the palace. Hidden machines beneath the floor started shaking the entire building while ancient systems powered on deep below the city. The royal engineers stared at the glowing screens in horror. One scientist turned toward the emperor with panic in his voice. "Your Majesty," he said slowly, "this armor was connected to an ancient war network." At that exact moment, the final lock on the armor released. The giant chest plate slowly opened with a loud metallic roar. Princess Lyra collapsed forward weakly, and Ethan quickly caught her before she hit the ground. The giant palace hall became completely silent as Ethan held Princess Lyra in his arms. The young princess struggled to breathe, while weak blue lights flickered across the damaged armor behind them. Royal guards quickly rushed forward, but the emperor raised his hand and stopped them. For the first time that night, every alien inside the palace looked at the human mechanic differently. Only minutes earlier, Ethan had been a poor worker everyone mocked. Now he was the person who had saved the future ruler of the empire. Royal medical teams carefully carried Princess Lyra toward the emergency chambers while engineers continued staring at the ancient armor with fear. The machine was still active. Hidden symbols kept glowing across its surface, while strange system messages appeared on palace screens faster than scientists could translate them. Deep below the city, ancient engines rumbled like sleeping giants, slowly waking up after thousands of years. Nobody understood what was happening anymore. The armor had become more dangerous after opening, not less. Meanwhile, news of the human mechanic spread across the empire like wildfire. Giant public screens replayed the moment the armor unlocked again and again. Citizens watched in disbelief as reporters explained how a simple human maintenance spray succeeded where the empire's greatest engineers had failed. Across crowded cities, ordinary workers started cheering for Ethan. Factory employees, cargo pilots, and repair crews proudly shared the story online. But inside the upper levels of society, many powerful nobles felt embarrassed and humiliated. Some even demanded the emperor punish the engineers for allowing a human to shame the empire. Inside a private royal meeting chamber, angry voices filled the room. Several high-ranking scientists argued that Ethan's success was pure luck. Others claimed humans should not be trusted near ancient royal technology. One military general openly called humans primitive tool users. But before the arguments could continue, the chamber doors suddenly opened. Princess Lyra slowly entered the room wearing a medical breathing device while palace guards followed behind her. The entire room instantly became quiet. The princess walked directly toward Ethan, who stood silently near the back wall holding his old toolbox. Many nobles looked shocked that the future ruler of the empire would approach a human mechanic so openly. Princess Lyra stopped in front of Ethan and looked directly into his eyes. "You saved my life," she said softly. "Every royal engineer failed me, but you never panicked." Ethan looked uncomfortable under the attention of the powerful aliens surrounding him. "I only fixed a machine," he replied simply. Princess Lyra slowly shook her head. "No," she answered. "You solved a problem everybody else was too proud to understand." Her words made several engineers lower their heads in embarrassment. The emperor then stood from his throne and announced something that shocked the entire chamber even more. Ethan would remain inside the royal palace as a special advisor to the empire's engineering division. Angry whispers instantly spread across the room. A human mechanic working beside royal scientists was almost unthinkable. But before anyone could protest further, every light inside the palace suddenly turned red again. A loud warning siren echoed across the city. Royal officers immediately activated emergency screens while frightened voices filled the chamber. One military commander rushed toward the emperor with panic on his face. "Unknown ships detected near the outer border," he reported quickly. Giant holograms suddenly appeared above the room, showing dark warships slowly emerging from deep space. The ships carried no empire markings. Their designs looked ancient, almost forgotten. Then the same deep mechanical voice from the armor echoed through the palace once again. "Warning. Ancient enemy signal detected." Fear spread across every face in the chamber. One old historian looked at the warships and whispered in horror, "Impossible. The Void Fleet has returned." Panic spread across the royal palace as warning alarms echoed through every hallway. Military officers rushed between command stations while giant hologram screens displayed the dark enemy warships moving slowly toward the Empire's borders. The ancient ships looked damaged and old, but their size terrified everyone watching. Some vessels were larger than entire cities. Royal scientists quickly searched historical records while frightened nobles argued loudly inside emergency meeting rooms. Most citizens across the Empire had never even heard of the Void Fleet before tonight. Inside the Royal Command Center, Princess Lyra stood beside the Emperor while military leaders prepared the Empire's defenses. The Royal Navy was powerful, but many defense systems across the outer colonies suddenly stopped responding after the ancient armor activated. Engineers worked desperately to restart communication networks, orbital cannons, and planetary shields. But every advanced system continued malfunctioning without explanation. Fear slowly turned into hopelessness as more enemy ships appeared from deep space. Meanwhile, Ethan quietly studied the ancient armor inside the palace engineering chamber. Unlike the other scientists, he stopped focusing on the computers and looked directly at the old machine itself. Dust covered many hidden control panels while ancient mechanical locks remained half-frozen after centuries without maintenance. Ethan slowly realized something important. The armor was never meant to work alone. It was connected to an enormous defense network hidden beneath the Empire. And after thousands of years, that network had simply been forgotten. Ethan quickly rushed into the Royal Command Center carrying his old toolbox. Several officers became angry the moment they saw him interrupting military operations. But Princess Lyra immediately defended him. Ethan explained that the Empire's ancient defense systems were not destroyed. They were stuck, neglected, and partially locked down after centuries without proper maintenance. Many scientists still refused to believe him. They argued that no human could possibly understand technology built by the Empire's ancient founders. But the princess trusted Ethan now more than anyone else in the palace. Guided by old symbols from the armor, Ethan led a small team deep below the royal city into forgotten underground chambers hidden for thousands of years. Massive machines filled the darkness like sleeping giants buried beneath the Empire. Dust covered ancient reactors, defense engines, and giant mechanical control systems connected to planetary weapons. The alien scientists tried using advanced computers again, but nothing responded properly. Ethan calmly walked forward and inspected the ancient systems by hand. After several minutes, he smiled slightly and opened his toolbox. Hours later, the giant underground chamber suddenly roared back to life. Ancient engines shook the entire city. Power flooded through forgotten defense networks across the Empire while massive orbital cannons slowly activated above distant planets. Citizens across the galaxy stared into the skies as ancient satellites and war platforms awakened for the first time in thousands of years. Inside the palace, shocked military officers watched system screens rapidly return online. The impossible was happening again. The same human mechanic everyone mocked had repaired technology that entire generations of alien scientists could not understand. The Void Fleet finally reached the capital system only minutes later. Giant enemy warships moved toward the royal planet while citizens prepared for destruction. Then suddenly, thousands of ancient defense cannons hidden across nearby moons and stations opened fire together. Bright beams of energy filled space like giant rivers of light. Enemy ships exploded one after another while the Empire's reactivated defense network pushed the ancient fleet backward. For the first time since the crisis began, hope returned to the galaxy. After the battle ended, millions of citizens gathered across the capital city to celebrate their survival. Huge screens displayed the image of Ethan standing beside Princess Lyra while reporters called him the hero of the Empire. The same nobles who once mocked humans now stood silent in embarrassment. During a massive public ceremony, Princess Lyra walked toward Ethan before the entire galaxy and placed the royal symbol of honor onto his old mechanic jacket. "You did not save us with power," the princess said proudly. "You saved us with human ingenuity." And from that day forward, the galaxy never looked at humans the same way again.